Thanks for joining us on the NRT Now podcast, part of the largest Christian music site online, newreleasetoday.com. Sit back and relax as we chat with your favorite artists, introduce you to new artists, and more. Now here's your host, Jake.
Hey, it is time for another Next Big Thing episode, and we are here with Seth and Jenna. It is aptly named Him and Her Worship because I think there's a him and her involved with this, so very cleverly named, I gotta say.
Oh, thank you.
Very descriptive.
Yeah, I know. It's pretty straightforward.
Oh.
Yes.
Well, awesome to have you guys here, and tell us a little bit about what Him and Her Worship is all about.
Yes, absolutely. So we are a husband and wife worship band. And as of right now, kind of what we do is we live in our 13-foot camper and we travel around the country playing worship nights and Sunday mornings in churches around the country. And we've been doing this for about 2.5 years at this point, I think. So there's a longer story that we can tell, but basically we fell in love with making worship music and we couldn't go back to normal life. And so now this is what we do and we love it.
Yeah.
Since you are living out of your 13-foot camper, which to me seems tiny.
Yep.
Yes, it is.
So you guys have got to really like each other if you guys are living in that close of a space.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's really interesting because when we first bought all of our equipment, we knew that we could afford the type of van that we got, which is a Ford Transit Connect, and it only had a 2,000-pound towing capacity. So we knew that we wanted to get a trailer that we could live in that was light enough. And so that's what we arrived at, was the 13-foot Scamp. And funny enough, it has now become, in a way, our brand's mascot. People absolutely love it. And we really just sleep in it. And then normally we're either at churches or cool places. So we're not in it very often. It's just basically a cheap bed that we pull around.
We say that there's 2 rooms in our camper, inside and outside. So
Yes, yeah.
Well, and that's crazy to think now that we've all, for this last however many months now, have been all stuck inside with each other. A lot of us have 1,000 or 2,000 whatever square feet to kind of get away from each other when it gets too much. But
yes.
That's a hard thought for me to process, is everything in that 13-foot kind of small trailer.
Yeah. Luckily, over COVID, we've been able to go to really cool places like national parks and places so that we weren't totally trapped in our camper. So we've been able to navigate that whole situation. So that's been very helpful. But we normally just sleep in our camper and that's about it.
Yep.
So I'd like to talk a little bit about just some of the places that you've been. What are some of your favorite places and favorite times in this kind of nomadic lifestyle?
Oh, man.
That's a great question. And the answer that immediately comes to my mind always is the West, specifically Montana and Idaho and Colorado and Wyoming. Those states are just incredible. And it speaks to our souls in this special way. The fact that you can be somewhere and see nobody for miles and miles and miles and just seeing the mountains. And we've only been there to those places a handful of times, but we absolutely love the West. Yeah. Do you have anything to add?
No, I totally agree.
Yeah.
So if we want to get into our story a little bit, when we first started, we basically sold all of our possessions, quit our jobs, and bought the equipment and went on tour. And we went on a 20,000-mile tour over 2 months. We played 30 shows, basically split in half, 15 on each coast. And we lived in Minneapolis, so we left Minneapolis, drove across I-90, and kind of left the Midwest behind. And it just kept getting better every state. You kind of go from Minnesota to South Dakota and then into Montana. And, man, Montana blew our mind, and then into Idaho, and Idaho blew our mind, and then Washington and Oregon and all these amazing places. And I have distinct nostalgic memories for those first couple months of just mind-blowing and amazing. And then going down the Highway 1 all the way down the coast into California and just, oh man, I can still smell the ocean. Oh yeah. So I would say for us, those places. And then even we've also have a very special love of the Southwest too. The colors and how just drastic, especially Arizona, is just so different. And I think it's the most diverse ecological, right?
I think so.
Yeah, ecosystem. It has 7 different So like you can
Wow.
experience it. Yeah, I never knew that until this time. So there's like so many amazing different, like there's even a tundra there's a tundra in Arizona, which is insane.
Yeah.
So so like
Wow.
yeah, I know, crazy, right?
I didn't come into this for a science lesson. What the
Yeah,
heck?
right?
I know. I'm so sorry. So I feel like for us, we have wanderlust and love the outdoors, and those
satisfies that.
and the national parks out there are just unbelievable. And I don't know, I think nature in those capacities really speak to us and inspire us insanely. So yes, I would say those. To answer your question, that's what we've come to love.
Yeah.
Oh, and you're speaking my language there. I'm a Wyoming boy at heart.
Nice.
Did you grow up there?
Yeah, I did for most of my life. Spent in central-ish Wyoming, and you're right. The gorgeousness, the beauty, the wide open spaces. I mean, the sagebrush we can talk about. I don't think you necessarily classify that as beauty, but just
I don't think so.
There is something overwhelming about the fact that there's only 500,000 people in Wyoming. Like, I don't know how to express what it's like to drive and not see anyone for a very long time.
Yeah. I think its beauty is that it's not that beautiful in this weird way. Like, it's not like when you go to Yosemite and you stand at the face of Half Dome or whatever, but Wyoming and some other states like that are like, they're so desolate, but they're beautiful in their desolation. And I don't know.
It's like man has not touched them much. And
they can't. Man can't rule over Wyoming.
Yeah.
Wyoming is always gonna defeat humankind. And it's beautiful.
Yeah, that's like New Mexico too, you know? Yeah. So we love all the there's something amazing about those places. Yeah.
Yep, very much so. And it's always a treat for us to get to go home and just experience that. I mean, I've driven some of those roads so many times that at this point I kind of zone out. Like, I know this is probably bad to admit, but when you're driving so much, like you've driven a road so much that you get there or halfway there and you're like, how did I get here? Like, I don't remember the last, like, I know I was awake and aware, but I just don't remember that last few minutes there.
That is the worst.
I know that feeling.
We put over 100,000 plus miles on our vehicle in the past couple of years, and there's nothing more terrifying than like kind of snapping out of it, whatever those are, and realize like, I don't know how I got here. And I'm really glad that we didn't get in an accident because I do not feel like I was aware at all. And so I can definitely relate to that.
I think your problem often is reading every sign. Like sometimes when he's tired, he'll just like read every storefront sign and just make a comment about it. And we almost hit someone.
Hey.
Yeah.
We've never gotten any accidents. I'm very good at driving.
Wild distraction.
Yes.
That's awesome. Shifting a little bit to the music side, I understand both of you guys have been doing music since you guys were really little.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that journey and to where you guys are at now.
Absolutely. For me, I wouldn't say when I was really little that I play music. My parents are big music fans. They're not good singers, as they would admit. They always say that, so I'm speaking for them. They kind of like instilled an appreciation for music. But then when I was in middle school, I joined like the middle school band and I played trumpet poorly. Then got really into enjoying like Beatles music and like The Who and just classic rock stuff. And so I asked my parents for a guitar when I was in high school, or I'm sorry, in 8th grade. And I ended up getting this really cheap guitar and I learned like every Beatles song I could on it. Do you want to tell your childhood from there? Yeah.
So I'm the youngest of 6 kids. I'm like not even close to my closest sibling. Like there's 10 years between me and the closest sibling and then another 5 between the next one. So my parents always call me the third caboose. So I was kind of in some ways an only child, but I also in like my very young years was basically like brought around to follow my sisters singing in competitions for. It was basically like a high-level show choir, I guess you'd call it. They're all very talented singers. So I think it was kind of like I was in the environment. I got a drum set when I was in kindergarten, and I taught myself how to play drums, and then started piano lessons in 1st grade. And like my family was pretty musical. Like Our answering machine at home was us singing in like 4-part harmony or something. So we were one of those weird families.
Well, let's take this pause right here. Like for all the younger crowd here, like there was actual answering machines. Some of them actually had tapes.
Yeah.
Literally tapes. And it was a long process because you had to get it perfect. Oh my gosh.
Yep.
Making me feel old.
Yeah, right.
So that was kind of like those years. I was actually in a band in grade school, like an actual rock band that we played Switchfoot covers and Beverly Hills by Weezer for our grade school talent shows. And that was really, really, really fun. And then, yeah, we both got to high school. We went to the same high school, which was a dormitory school for kids who wanted to go into ministry full time. That was really the whole point. So I was from Central Illinois and Jenna was from Boston, and we both ended up there, and that's where we met.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to talk more about that?
And in our high school, it was very musical focused, but it was more like a classical training style. So piano was a requirement for everyone for at least 2 years. I had taught myself how to play chords on piano, but I didn't know too much outside of that, and other than like reading notation from learning trumpet. And then choir was also something that you had to do for 2 years. And so both of our freshman years, we were required to be in choir and piano. Seth, also, you were in some like the symphonic bands and stuff. Yeah. And for me, like I didn't feel like super confident in music. Like I could do it, but I was not comfortable singing in front of people. Like if I was in a group with people, I was totally fine with that. So I ended up making the elite choir my junior year and making the musical my junior year as well. Seth was a little bit more open with his musical playing. Like people knew you were good at music.
And I think I sang some solos then, and I was in a chord. My musical things was weird though, because I was like in jazz band as a drummer. I was in symphonic band. I was in an a cappella quartet with guys. I was in a Christian screamo band. So like my extensive musical. But to be really honest, like Jen and I were mostly focused on sports. If I think back about high school, it was like I was doing a bunch of musical stuff. Like we were both talented in music, but like I was more concerned about getting a scholarship to play college football, and you were concerned about getting a college scholarship to play soccer. Like that's what we were focused on. And so basically after that, we both ended up going to the same college to do ministry. I was going to become a pastor. Jenna was going to become a teacher. And for me, I basically knew immediately that I didn't fit in and it wasn't for me. And college football was not going the way that I wanted it to. Basically, I ended up blowing up my knee my sophomore year. Mm-hmm. And then I got a phone call a couple months later between basically first and second semester over Christmas break from the dean of students telling me that I had failed out of school and I couldn't come back. So that was kind of a huge blow to what I thought our life was going to look like. And Jenna was a year younger, so she had just gotten to school. We had been long distance for a year dating. She just got to school. Things were feeling good. And then I was gone a semester, like right after she got there. So that really started a pretty long and hard journey for both of us. Mostly for me, I guess, because I ended up moving back in with my parents and had to try and figure out what I was going to do with my life, which was not an easy or fun journey.
And I'd say like musically at that point, you kind of like gave up music for a while too while you were there, because your mom kept bothering you like, you should play for church. You should play piano for church. But you're just like
I was
not
so
wanting to even go to church.
Yeah, that's kind of the beginning of this journey, because basically I'll fast forward a little bit, but after 3 years of trying to figure out what I was going to do, I got a phone call from a friend who basically was going to full-time ministry as a worship pastor and had I would call it almost like a School of Rock type situation where it was a music academy, but it was specifically to teach kids how to play in bands. So it was very like Nashville numbers oriented and chord progressions and like all of that. So it was very focused on being able to be a useful musician and not like as much classically based. Yeah. And so I ended up working there, which moved me into Minneapolis. And because I moved to Minneapolis, Jen and I were able to get married, and we got married, and I started leading worship at church like a lot.
And for me, like I hadn't really done music since high school. So it was like 4 years. And then we got married, and Seth literally one day was like, so I signed you up to lead worship this weekend in like 4 days. I was like, are you serious? What? Like, again, I had never sung in front of many people. And he's just like, yeah, someone had to back out. So I told the worship pastor that you could do it. And that was like the first time ever.
Yeah. I didn't ask. I just informed
you just
I
did.
Voluntold,
Yep.
you know.
Yes.
Yep.
It's weird that it goes that direction because it seems like it always comes back the other direction. So bravo.
Yep.
Yes. Well, I knew she was amazing, but she just needed someone to force it a little bit.
Yeah.
So I did.
And I will say it happened again like a year later when our worship pastor was like, hey, Jen, I put you on the schedule to learn bass. I know you've never played it before. You have 2 weeks. Here's my bass. You can just learn. I was like, okay.
Yes.
So that was kind of how it went for me. It was like I was forced into it, but then as I started doing it, I was like, this is sick. I love it.
Yeah.
And it was weird because I was going to college to be a teacher. And so our pastor, he's our brother-in-law, was like, hey, you should be in the kids ministry section. And so I was like volunteering there, but I like just did not like it as much as playing for worship. And I was like, this feels bad. It feels bad that I like leading worship more than hanging out with kids, which is literally what I'm getting a degree in. So that's kind of eye-opening.
It was very eye-opening.
Yeah.
I think things started to kind of become pretty clear for us at that point.
Yeah.
So obviously, Seth, you pushed Jenna into the worship scene. It sounds like willingly. So, I mean, that's a plus,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
I was like, why'd you do this? But I was kind of like, okay, here's my chance. I have to do it. So
Yeah.
it was willing.
So that reminds me of a quick side story. I love when that happens to other people because for us, it was baseball games. When we moved down here to Texas, my wife didn't like going to baseball games. She didn't like sports. She kind of had the opinion, like watching it on TV, it's kind of boring and all that.
Yeah.
So I laid down the probably admittedly worst guilt trip ever about how you want me to do stuff that you want to do, but you won't. It was probably not in the 5 love languages book or anything like that.
Yeah.
But it worked.
Yeah.
So she went to a game with me. And then as we're leaving the stadium that day, she's like, all right, so when we do this next year, and I just had to give her a look like it took all that work for me to get you to here the first time. And now you're just all in. Like, it was that easy.
Interesting.
That's really cool.
Wow.
So-
it is that easy, I guess. So a loving force.
So I love when that happens to other people, and it probably shouldn't make me that happy, but at least this was towards the worship side.
Yes.
It was something godly and kingdom minded and all that. So I
Yes.
give you props for that.
Right.
Yes,
I love
absolutely.
So this is probably right around when it sounds like when him and her worship kind of started kicking into gear as a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We had a pretty massive transition. We got married. A couple that was volunteering at a reservation down in Arizona offered their house to us to live in. And we both got new jobs. I worked for an aviation company, and Jenna she got a teaching job. Things were like going really well. We had more money than we knew what to do with. I don't have a college degree, and I was traveling internationally. Things were going the way that it's supposed to go. And we were miserable. Like, we were incredibly miserable.
Yeah.
And we didn't know why, but we just felt like we weren't doing what God wanted us to do. Like, we just felt like there was a calling on our life, and we just weren't doing it. So we started these walk journeys where we would basically walk. We would bring a tablet with us, like a leather-bound journal, and we would just write down every single idea that we could possibly come up with, that things that we were passionate about, which was like flipping furniture. I love motorcycles, so I was thinking about like flipping motorcycles, literally any and every possible entrepreneurial idea.
Yeah.
And we kind of arrived at we both are super passionate about traveling. So we both felt like traveling was something that we really wanted to do. And music was something that we knew that we had a gift for. And people had started encouraging us at church to start doing music together because our voices blended well. And so, that was kind of the crux of it. And if you want to take it from there.
The couple who lived in our home was coming back for the summer. And so we knew that for about 3 months, we needed to just be somewhere else. And so we were discussing what Seth was just saying, maybe we can just travel. How are we going to make money? And we were just throwing a bunch of ideas out. And then basically we're like, well, hey, we know how to play music. Let's do that. And we were talking to our brother-in-law Seth was talking to him and just like, yeah, maybe we'll play in like coffee shops and bars and breweries, and it'll be great. Like, we can make a living doing that. And he was just like, that's such a cool idea. I think you should do that. But you should consider playing in churches too, because I have a bunch of pastor friends all around the country, and I can just call them up and you can probably play at their church. I'm sure they would let you. And we're like, okay, yeah, let's throw the church idea in there. So this is like about 4 months before we went on tour. We made a secular music album. So it was like 6 songs, and it was just like kind of Lumineer style. And we had the intention of maybe doing a worship album after that, but we just like ran out of time and money basically. For the next like 4 months or so, we started preparing and trying to book shows and stuff. And it was really amazing because we had planned on playing secular venues, but all of them fell through and we ended up playing 30 churches instead. It was like this very, very clear direction that admittedly we were a little embarrassed about at first, because we had played in church but like Christian music was not our favorite. And so we were just like, well, okay, this is fine. But then like when we went on tour for that first time, like by the end of it, we were completely changed, both in our motivations, and we realized like playing worship music is like, that's the thing we're supposed to be doing. And then also like knowing that we need to play music, like that needs to be our job.
Yeah. So that's kind of the beginning. It was crazy because we came back from that. And obviously, as Jenna mentioned, like our life was changed. It was so crazy because we came back to where we had started and we had a lot of obligations that we had to do. Like I had a place to work and we were helping another ministry start a new ministry, and we were playing for our church, and we were also playing in Him and Her Worship as well a couple times a week or a couple times a month. And we just like burn out really fast. And we just came to the conclusion, like there's either 2 options. We have to fully commit, go full time, or we need to let go of Him and Her Worship and just do what we were doing before. And so we decided, no, we're gonna go full time again. Basically, we decided again.
Yeah.
And it was another crazy process because we basically had to sell all of our possessions again. And we started out making our first record as Him and Her Worship called Beacon, which came out in June of last year.
Yeah.
That was a crazy time in our life because basically we had never made a worship record. We made it happen. The song All Along got hit like the Spotify editorial playlist, New Christian Music Friday. And that was a really amazing reassurance that like we were doing what I feel like God was wanting us to do. And we had gone full time too. So it was like really a crazy moment because like when we went on tour the first time, we just wanted to break even and have a good time. And this time, like we had a lot more expectation that God had to show up and had to take care of us because there was no plan B. There wasn't any fallback. There wasn't a place to go home to. I remember we had this prayer list that was like 2.5 pages long, and God answered all those prayers. And it was just an incredible time in our life and our journey.
So now fast forward 100,000 miles, couple years, and you have the album that just released not long ago. And that album was packed with a ton of story and a lot of heart and experience behind that one.
Yeah. It was, it started about a year before, a year before we released it, maybe a little bit more. But when we released our first EP, Beacon, is when the story of Even in the Dark started. We were feeling super confident as you can. I feel like as an artist, one day you're confident, the next day you hate everything about yourself. I don't know if that's just us. But like we were feeling pretty confident, like, man, All Along made it on an editorial playlist. That's a huge deal. We were immediately thinking like, okay, we need to bring more people onto our team because that record was us two and our friend who tracked it and engineered it. And then we had a mix and a master and that was it. And so we're like, okay, let's make this one bigger. It was a year of trying to figure out who was going to work on it. And so we would just kind of reach out to people and some would not ever answer. Some would answer and kind of reject us. We met with a couple of people and then simultaneously we were living on the road. Like we had left our friends and family in Minnesota and just how tough that can be and lonely. And on top of that, also Seth's mom was diagnosed with cancer in August. Like in our ministry, it was tough. In our everyday, it was tough. And in our family life, it was tough as well.
It was like a perfect storm, I feel. And that's basically where all the songs got written. And it kind of ended up at the culmination, I guess you would say. It was on January 2nd, probably the most well-known song from this new record called It'll Be All Right was written. And that song we ended up writing from my mom's perspective for my mom. And we finished it, and she ended up passing away that day. So she never got to hear it. It just felt like after that, after her funerals, like we knew that we had songs that people really needed to hear. Mm-hmm. At the same time, too, we also realized that, like, I'm pretty sure that we're actually going to have to do this all by ourselves. Yeah. And so we ended up renting a cabin in Texas, in the middle of nowhere. And
you might know, it was in Pittsburgh, Texas, right? I don't know.
I don't remember.
Just because you're in Texas, I thought maybe you would know. It's like East Texas.
Yes.
Yeah, there's a lot of Texas that I still have not
explored. It's okay.
Right? Yes. Texas is humongous. Yeah.
And they make sure you know Texas.
Yes. Yes. So we ended up renting a cabin, and we did all of like pre-production and finishing writing. That kind of all happened over a week. And we realized that like these songs really, really, really needed to be heard. And we were driving, we basically finished that week, and we drove across the South and ended up in Phoenix, Arizona. And that's when COVID happened. And it was tough because like we basically had a really awesome schedule lined up. You know, we normally play somewhere between 150 to 200 worship nights or Sunday mornings a year. So we had a really good, like after Phoenix was going to be Nevada and California and Idaho and Montana and all these places. We were stuck there. And we couldn't really leave because it was at that point very unknown. So it was like week to week. So it'd be like, okay, we'll just stay here one more week, and then we'll leave and we'll go to California next week. And then they're like, oh, no, okay, we'll just leave, wait one more week. And so we ended up staying in a church parking lot in Phoenix, Arizona for 3 months. And that's where we actually finished the record. Wow. We made it in a nursery at a church. Yeah. So, yeah.
Not at all what we were planning, because like when we were starting the planning or the thoughts for that record, we were like, we're going to have a producer. We want this guy to mix and master and blah, blah, blah. And we had like all these ideas, and like we ended up again needing to buy all the gear to record, and we were recording it in this just nursery. It was like right next to this busy highway. So we had to wait for the planes to fly by. Like we're recording vocals with all of our bedding covered, like, wow. Like you're making a sound booth out of like this just janky like sheet situation.
Yeah.
And waiting
moving
for
blankets.
Yeah. And it was like, man, this is not what I had expected.
Not what we expected at all. Our plan was to be flying back and forth to go, because we wanted instrumentalists to play on it back in Minneapolis, but flying wasn't a thing. Yeah. So it's just like, we literally ended up tracking the entire record ourselves, other than a couple instruments. And we were able to find an amazing friend who basically, we call it like, what do we use the word? For Kelly?
Oh, QC?
Yeah, just like he was a contributing producer. So he would just kind of just help us make sure that we were on the right track. But it wasn't like a full producer or anything. So it was like a completely different vision. Like it wasn't the way that we thought it would go. But we're just so thankful, because I just think if we would have continued to tour, there's no way that we would have been able to finish the record.
Because there's like an hour of setup time for our live show, but then it would be an hour of setup for our recording. So it's just like, it would not have worked at all.
No way.
Man, I think back to the full quarantine days where it's like, at least there was that. Like there was a big blessing that we could finish our record while we were in one place, because we wouldn't have been able to do it if we were touring.
Yeah.
And we learned too, like we don't need to be touring all the time, because somehow we survived without our main source of income, and also pouring money into this album.
Right.
I have no idea how.
Yeah.
Other than God took care of us. So.
Absolutely take care of us. Yeah.
Isn't that crazy? Just how many things have become clearer through the season.
Yeah.
I mean, like just family time. I think with more artists than just you guys, how important that time at home with the family is now that we're forced to stop and take a look at it.
Yeah, that's so true. Like, this is for everyone who was praying for more family time. And I don't know, God's creative in how he answers prayers. And so, it takes a pandemic. And for us, like, we were feeling a little burnt out from the road. It was, again, as I've said and will say forever, like, it can be lonely. And we ended up being able to spend time with family and make new friends because we were marooned in this parking lot. And like the pastor of the church lived next door with his family, and they like became our best friends. So it was like
family,
right. And because we don't have kids, so it's like family time. Our family time is all the time because we're always together. So like, I think I agree. I think that good things are always there. We just need to be looking for it.
Yeah.
So as we're wrapping up here, I actually forgot to ask, like, you're talking about getting married in just some of that time. How long have you guys been married?
3.5 years.
Yeah, 3.5 years. It'll be 4 in May.
Yeah.
It's crazy. 3.5 years of being married and 3 years of being him and her worship. So yes. Yeah. So it might even be less than that, honestly. But or more than that, I mean. Mm-hmm. But yes, 3.5 years.
So I got to ask, at this point, I know this is probably way off the beaten path, but are you guys getting the baby pressure from the family yet? This is just unscientific research. Like, it seems like there's a certain amount of time from when you get married to when the family starts putting on the grandbaby pressure.
Oh man, all Seth's siblings are way older than him, so we have like a bazillion nieces.
I have 20 nieces and nephews.
Yeah. So I'm gonna say, like, I don't think our family is the one that pressures us.
Yeah, we get no pressure.
Like
from
my
family.
Parents, and it's just me and my brother, and like they haven't had kids yet either, but they're just like, you'll have one when you have them.
Right.
Like
your parents didn't
really
have
chill.
you guys till they were older.
Like 32 or something. Yeah. But the thing that's interesting is we get a lot of pressure from strangers.
Strangers give us a lot of pressure. Yeah. Yes.
Like, oh, good thing you're doing this while you have no kids. When you're gonna have kids, it's just like, I don't even know you. Why are you asking?
Yes. So, again, like, our families have seen the journey that we're on, and kind of, especially for like my side, they saw me for those 3 years trying to figure out what we're going to do with our life. And now I think they all kind of see that we're doing our calling, and they all get it. Yeah. So that's been such a blessing for us.
Yeah. And I think they know that when we decide to have kids, then that'll be the time, and they don't need to pressure us.
Right.
As if pressuring someone is going to make them want to have kids. Like, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
With our families, they were all anxious to have kids, for us to have kids. You know, and my mom was like, all right, I'm ready for a grandkid. Do I need to draw pictures or
oh my
no,
gosh.
No, we're good. But,
that's so funny.
My goodness.
It just makes me curious if that's just me or if that's like everybody's parents.
I think it's a lot of people's parents.
Yeah, thankfully, as I said, I'm the third caboose, so they got plenty of grandkids.
Yeah.
So yes.
I think that's kind of that low point where we just got to cut this off before it goes too farther down the hill from here. Oh man, but no, we definitely appreciate you guys hanging out with us for a while, and man, just such a good time getting to chat with you guys.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you so much for having us. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for hanging out with us for this episode of the NRT Now podcast. Be sure to subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And special thanks to Neon Feather for providing our theme music. Make sure to check out newreleasetoday.com and our socials for more great content. See you next episode.